Double P podcast. Double P.
What I like to call
Double P.
What I like to call
Double P podcast.
Welcome to
Myfanwy.
Epiphany,
a podcast about the Rook, based on the novel by Daniel O'Malley, and we're breaking down the new Stars television show here in the United States. I believe it airs on other channels around the world. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. Now, we had to combine them. Catfish, why wasn't there a podcast last week?
All right, well, so, Bubba, I was watching the episode, and I was writing down notes. You know, the only two notes that I have are that I was going to give it 4.5 Triple H's.
Triple H?
Yeah, Harpo-haired hive minds. And then the question I asked was, does a five-way with only two minds count as group sex? And then the doorbell rang.
Yes.
The doorbell rang, Pawn Bubba.
Okay.
And then the next thing I know,
Yeah.
it's the morning, and I'm waking up. So I don't know who or what came to the door. All I know is Ms. Catfish is walking around the house, whistling her ass off, happy as a bird. Haven't heard a whistle like that in years and years, Bubba. So somehow, as I was watching last week's episode, I fell asleep. Something happened.
Yeah,
and
something happened to your lady. Now, I don't want to say we should ask Grantchester about this, but let's just go.
I think you should ask Grantchester, but...
I mean, you know, I don't know. It's weird that you bring up Grantchester, because this week I decided, you know, we're always changing up the letters that we use, the doubles, the triples, whatever. And I've decided that's not good enough for this show.
No.
So from now on, I'm going to give it a rating on the Triple G scale. Every week, it's going to be Triple G. Yes, the Grantchester godliness gauge, and that is how amazing Grantchester was this week, because I have my own epiphany, and I realized somehow, I don't know how I came to this, that Grantchester is the most important person on this show.
Catfish, you talked for a long time, and I'm sure our listeners are happy about this, but we need to get to Lady Stephanie, who was on our preview podcast but has missed the two previous podcasts. Stephanie, big picture. You've watched the first 4 episodes of The Rook. Lady Stephanie, you loved this book, and it is taking some diversions from the book. What is your initial opinion of these first 4 episodes?
Well, I got to tell you, I missed the other podcast episodes because somebody wiped my memory.
Oh, no.
So I've been, trying to regain strength and maybe try to get my memories back. And, thank God I haven't, because then I wouldn't have to remember this terrible show.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow. You know, I was feeling the way that you were, Lady Stephanie, for the first 3 episodes. But for tonight's episode, I gave it on the, as we know from now on, the Triple G scale.
Triple G?
Grantchester godliness gauge. I gave it an 8.5 on the Grantchester godliness gauge.
Why
high score.
Yeah, that's a high score. Explain to our listeners how this gauge works.
Well, it's how great the show is, and somehow I feel happier about the show for some reason when we see more Grantchester. So the more Grantchester, the better for me. It's only 8.5 because we didn't see him enough, but we saw him do lots of good stuff tonight. And my whole attitude on this show is turned around. See, the book decided to have her find out right away who she was by telling her stories, her reading things about herself. She got herself quickly up to speed, and then have a mystery, but also have lots of special powered villains. But the show wants her to slowly discover who she is and ignore all the really odd or cool, interesting villains, and instead have another character chase down garden variety, sort of special people, and they've added sex. So this is clearly, the show is far superior to the books. Tonight, 8.5 on the Triple G.
That is pretty tough. Lady Stephanie, how do you react to Chevalier Catfish's ranking?
I think Chevalier Catfish might have, taken some potion or something, because this show is unrecognizable to the book that I love so much.
Yeah, it is tough. And I'm going to say that these 2 episodes, I'll take them in a whole. Episode 3 and episode 4, what's the difference between 3 and 4? 1. I think on a scale of 1 to 10, it's lucky to get 1 because even though I'm the one who remembers the book the least, this is a podcast about the Rook featuring 3 book readers. I only read the book once, so I don't remember it that well. But I personally think that they're killing the tension inherent in the books. On the previous podcast, I always talked about the Bourne identity, or I talked about Memento, stories where the lead character has amnesia. This show, rather than letting us see, the paranoia you would naturally have if you have amnesia, Myfanwy doesn't show it. Okay, she doesn't show it in the office, but she's still got to have this constant fear. We also have this insanity where the show keeps giving us flashbacks, and these aren't flashbacks of things like Myfanwy suddenly remembering. So, we're learning information that the character isn't learning. We're seeing things that the character can't remember. So we're always one step smarter than the lead character. I don't think it's working. I want to say something positive about the show because we can be so tough on it. The Gestalt, as I like to call them, the 4 non-blondes, I think they're great. I think they're creepy. I think they're the most interesting thing in the show. And even though Myfanwy's your lead character, you're giving action scenes to Olivia Munn's character. You're giving kind of the most fun, interesting stuff to the Gestalt. And so if they can find a way, we're halfway through with the series, guys. If they can find a way to round this into some sort of shape, I think we'll be okay. I think we'll have invested our time. I think our listeners will have enjoyed their time. But so far, it is tough. All right, I said something positive about the show. Chevalier Catfish, you said something positive about the show. You like Grantchester. You like sex scenes. Lady Stephanie, you've been so tough on the show, as I think anybody could be. What have been the positives about the Rook, in your opinion?
I love Olivia Munn. I'm not sure what their end game is with her character, but I love her. I think she's great. I think she's beautiful. I think she does her action scenes well. And then, like you, Pawn Bubba, I also love the Gestalt. I think they're pretty great. I think they acknowledge the weirdness with them enough, like they did in episode 4. I thought Olivia Munn's character interacting with the Gestalt was pretty cool. I like that whole dynamic. So I guess, the B story on the show. I'm not as invested in Myfanwy as I want to be, but I'm really invested in the Gestalt and the Monica Reed.
Yeah, I think they're doing that part the best. How do you feel about that, Chevalier Catfish?
Well, what I like about the Gestalt on the show is that in the books, they're very menacing, a lot more menacing and sort of devious than they are on the show. I like that they have basically taken most of the menacing stuff out and just put in a lot of weird, uncomfortable sex stuff. I think that's a real positive. I think that really adds to the excitement, and the danger of this show is to make Gestalt less intimidating and more just kind of weird.
Catfish, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If Myfanwy is dating the 4 Gestalt, are they a quintuple?
Well, that was my question. Are they a quintuple, or are they just
a couple? Just
kind of an unusual couple? That's my question. Is it group sex, yay or nay?
I think it's 4 couples in the hall.
So paired up each one?
Yeah, well, each of them seems to approach her in a different way. They take advantage of their, seemingly different personalities sort of to pressure her in a different way. Which, again, I think the taking out of all the weird paranormal stuff and replacing it with awkward sex stuff is really makes the show a lot stronger than the book.
It definitely helps it go with the TV show Sweet Bitter, which it airs before here in the United States. Guys, I'm going to real quickly just break down the beats of Chapter 3, and if you guys have any particular points you want to say, jump in. Mm-hmm. Focusing on our main character, what once again I assume is supposed to be the main character, Myfanwy in Chapter 3, it felt like you said Myfanwy? Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay, all right.
I thought she did practically nothing in Chapter 3. So she steals a key card to go look at her own medical records. She finds out about something called Glen Grove. She goes to an abandoned playground where there's those glass fragments that she saw at the big murder scene by the bridge in the river. Then,
it wasn't just the playground, though, right? Wasn't it the idea that was – it felt like that was the the school that had been demolished for some reason.
Right.
That's what I thought.
No, that's right. Correct. But kind of that was it. That's all she seemingly did in the third chapter. I feel like they're leaving her a bit short.
I agree. Myfanwy is the narrator. It's all from her perspective in the book. And she has many more letters to herself and communication with her former self than in this show, and it's just odd to see her take a back seat to her own story. Now, she did get stalked by a bit and was saved by our 4 non-blonde blondes, the Gestalt, where they were kicking ass. I love all the moments with the Gestalt. They capture this Lugat guy, I believe, named Peter, who possibly works for the leader of the Lugat, Lorik. If I have this correctly based on the show's suggestion, they're some sort of Russian crime syndicate. They capture him. There's a great moment with Myfanwy and one member of the Gestalt where she's like, "What's the matter? Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, it's nothing. I was shot." Meaning one of the other Gestalt was shot in the subway chase. So good. Then there's the awesome kiss when Myfanwy goes to see the Gestalt who was shot, the female Gestalt. And then as they're kissing, one guy spills his coffee, another wrecks his car. So good, so good. I love it.
Yeah, that led to, I'm not to jump too far ahead, but you know what I really like what they did with that was to make it into a really bizarre blackmail attempt in this episode.
Yeah.
Really powerful plotting in this show.
It really is. Let's get to a character I know Lady Stephanie likes. In Chapter 3, Monica Reed, it turns out this is personal for her. She's had a brother who was killed in a vulture raid. That implies her brother was one of these VMAs.
ENTs.
EVAs. It implies her brother was an EVA. And so then she goes, because this person that she cared about was undercover as somebody selling EVAs, she decides to take that over. In other words, she goes to this auction, this art auction. You have to pay 50,000 quid before you can even bid. And I actually did enjoy the idea of, okay, we're bidding on this art, but this art really represents a person with special abilities, EVA.
Right. Now, do you get the picture too? Because that picture was pretty cool. I want that picture. It was pretty cool. I want that picture.
What if?
I like that, you know, since again they paid to get the storyline behind this book, that they're ignoring so many of the storylines that were sort of integral to the plot of that book, and they've decided that no one cares about those storylines because it's just a book, but instead they're going to get rid of those and they're going to add this whole Russian and people selling off the EVAs on eBay.
eBay? Wait, what's eBay?
Yeah, eBay, that's where you buy the EVAs. You go onto eBay and you get the EVAs.
Am I going to need a PayPal account for eBay?
You are. You're going to need a backup email too.
No. Okay. So the final bit of the Chapter 3, I guess the third storyline running in it, is the trouble between Lady Farrier and Grantchester, who theoretically they're on the same team. They should be on the same sides. But because Grantchester has been giving up all this information to his side piece, the Home Secretary, Lady Farrier has to bust him. And apparently you're not allowed to engage in relationships without letting people know. Me too. Check A. Me too.
But isn't the I've turned to remember she's the Home Secretary, right? Isn't the Home Secretary sort of out of the power loop there? I mean,
she should be, because she's not part of the Check A.
Yes, but what you're forgetting, Lady Stephanie, is opposed to the silly way they did it in the book, where it was an independent agency that sort of consulted with the governments. That in here, they've decided to make them completely a subsidiary of the government, even going so far as to say that it's hard to hide the money that we pay you guys. So once again, a brilliant change from the book to make them just a corporate subsidiary rather than an independent group that's been around for 500 years.
Yeah, it makes them really dangerous that way.
It really does, because they have to fill out things in quadruplicate, and as you see, any fooling around It's time for HR.
Listen, Boris Johnson told me that the Check A is just a way for the EU to take control of our beloved homeland, England. All right, so I do want to point out that Chapter 3 also, for reasons I can't quite understand, seemed to introduce a new character who was in charge of, like, PR and coming up with the cover stories, except she disappeared and we never saw her in Chapter 4.
Well, the thing, but that's not exactly true. I'm pretty sure we saw her in episode 1, and she had maybe a line or so. Or at least she was talked about.
That may be, but
yeah.
It's quite possible that the EVA feud gave me amnesia, and I can't remember that. So Chapter 3 I thought was really tough. Chapter 4, let's get to it. This week's episode begins with a flashback to Myfanwy in psychiatry. Is she having an epiphany, or is this supposed to be flirting with psychiatrists? Because we know they're going to get busy later. How did you guys take this opening scene?
I mean, for me, the most important thing I got out of this scene was a reminder that other people like cheese too, because I really like cheese.
Lady Stephanie, can you give us any sort of insight, even if it's negative insight, on this introductory scene, flashback scene for Myfanwy?
I'm going to be honest, I don't really remember the first scene. That tells you something.
Well, to me, once again, I mentioned it before, these flashbacks seem to be frustrating. I don't believe the flashback of Myfanwy in a previous episode having a party when her parents weren't home and then falling off the garage and then shocking her dad. To me, those don't read as Myfanwy suddenly remembering something, having an epiphany, as if she's on this podcast. It was just like to let the audience know something that the main character doesn't. Right. Then in this episode, now later on we find out their relationship and how they have their back and forth. But again, it begins with a flashback, which I'm almost positive we're not supposed to take as our main character, Myfanwy, remembering something.
We're definitely not, because she only finds that doctor because she's investigating other files. And then when she sees him, she doesn't recognize him.
Yeah, I keep going to these previous Amnesia lead character movies. They don't, in Memento, have the audience know things that the characters don't. I mean, I guess you could say Leonard learned something in Memento, then he has short-term amnesia and he forgets it, so the audience remembers it and he doesn't. But that only happens a couple of times. In the Bourne Identity, there isn't a scene very early on saying, yes, Jason Bourne was trained like this and he does this. You know, he had to spend the whole movie finding it out. And so these flashback scenes just don't work for me.
You know, you've seen how other shows have decided to handle it. And then you see how this show has decided, you know, that just seemed a little bit too on the nose. We're going to do something completely different and revolutionary.
So let's just follow Myfanwy's story from this. So she's gone out. She's looked at this place. The next thing she's going to do is she's going to head back into the office, and she talks to her assistant, the assistant who's very helpful to Monica Reed and everybody else. She knows the keywords now. She knows the things to look up. So she's like, yeah, I'm going to need this file on the infamous Glen Grove file.
Now, see, here's another thing. I really like, in the book, as Myfanwy was kind of like discovering her life and trying to put the pieces together, she did sort of have a compatriot in that, and that was her secretary. What I really like, what they've done here is that they've decided that they're going to have her have absolutely no good relationship with her secretary whatsoever.
Not
I think
really.
That's a real strong choice that the TV show has decided to throw that part out from the book too. Super strong choice.
So Myfanwy has talked to her secretary. She wants these files. When who comes in? Grantchester, the guy who does the Triple G gauge for you, Chevalier Catfish. And he's like, I don't know why. Why were they targeting you? And it's like he's trying to pry her for information. We know she doesn't have information. She leaves, and that's going to inspire his storyline, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Okay, but before we leave this, we have to talk about how great he looked in his vest.
He does look good.
Okay.
I mean, he's got the fat tie going. I don't know how to tie one of those fat ties. I wish I could, but between that and the vest, I mean, he is put together.
He is a handsome man, and which Gestalt member are you most attracted to, Catfish?
Oh, let's hear it.
I mean, honestly, you've already got to get rid of the ones that, no kidding, still have Harpo hair in 2019 for some strange reason. So it's going to have to be between the woman and the one with the close cropped hair and the dark beard, the dark stubble.
Right.
He equally attractive.
That actor was in The Terror, which we covered here on Double P Podcast. Be sure to write to us at Double PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/Double PHQ. Search for Double P Podcast on the place you find podcasts like iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, those kind of things, and you'll be able to hear all and learn about all the shows we cover here on Double P. Stephanie, you didn't ask me. You're going to have to give an answer yourself, but I also have been saying these first couple of weeks, I am crazy about the female Gestalt.
I am too. Her name was Eliza in the book, so that's what I'm calling her.
Yeah, they call her that occasionally on the show.
Oh, okay. I agree. I like Eliza, so I think we're all in agreement here.
Alrighty, so following Myfanwy's storyline, she goes to get these files, and she's looking them up. And who shows up but Harpo, the twin Gestalts, the one with Harpo hair and the one with slick back hair. What do you get? Neither of us mentioned these two knuckleheads. Anybody feel anything towards these two Gestalt members besides the hate of Double H Harpo hair?
They're knuckleheads. They're just...
Yeah, I feel like if they're really trying to sell that they have different personalities, that, maybe they need to do a little bit more work. Anything about these guys.
I've grown to love the Harpo hair one who wears like the Royal Tenenbaums tracksuit all the time. I've grown to love him mainly just because I think he's like the dumb one, You know how in every Marx Brothers there's, the sarcastic one, the smart one, the cheap one. He's the dumb one of the Gestalt. So I actually kind of like seeing him. He makes me laugh.
Something else about this scene that's nice is I was complaining earlier that, in the book, she slowly kind of builds her strength of confidence, or strength of self, confidence, whatever. And in the show, I felt like they weren't doing that slowly. So they decided to go from 0 to 10 in this episode, which I super appreciated as a character growing. And she just decided
to do it.
That is
0 to 10. That's the best way.
That's the best way to do it. Character growth should be done in huge spurts, unmotivated. So basically, she just starts all of a sudden. She kind of turns the tables on these guys when they try to blackmail her. All of a sudden, she's a femme fatale, which again, super supported by everything we've seen so far, and also something she maintains throughout the rest of the episode. So I loved it.
While they are getting this kind of flirty banter, blackmail all's going on, Harpo Gestalt notices that she's looking at the personal file of Dr. Andrew G. Bristol, consulting psychiatrist, MBBS, FRC, Psych.
LOL.
LOL, right? And that upsets the Gestalt. What do you think? Should she ignore this psychiatrist like she seemingly kept telling herself and the Gestalt are telling her, or should she go enjoy this booty call? Did she make the right call?
This kind of confused me because do the Gestalt know about what went on with the psychiatrist in her? Or do they know what he was doing with her or cutting? I don't know.
It's hard to tell. I'm just going to say this based on what we've seen from the show. And again, I've had to put aside my notions of, everybody seems to be lying on this show, so you can't really trust anybody. But it seems to me like the Gestalt are not exactly what they were in the book. Right. So it feels like they had some sort of pre-existing relationship. I thought something had gone down bad with the school, that they were all it seems like they were all sort of scarred somewhat by the school, which is also a new twist. So for sure, I feel like she's got to go investigate. I mean, she's, again, as unbelievable as it would be that someone would know that they were going to lose their memory and then write themselves a whole bunch of notes. That's still the way they handle it in the book. And in the show, she managed to record one 5-minute podcast to herself. And so she's got to find all the information by herself. So where else is she going to go? Except she's going to follow anybody who knows what happened at the school.
Let me say, to subscribe to Myfanwy's podcast, just search Myfanwy's Epiphany on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, all the great places. All right, so she goes to meet up with this sexy psych. And what do you guys think about how this developed, how she suddenly ended up in his bed? Did it seem believable?
No. Oh, wait, let me take the Chevalier Catfish approach. Yes, It makes perfect sense that this psychiatrist who's supposed to be treating this EVA and all of her secret powers, of course they would be jumping into bed together, especially because he's married.
Now, what you're all conveniently forgetting is before the sexy time, we actually learned some really important information. The only information that is really new and interesting in any way in this entire episode is that...
Skip this. Get to the sex.
Is that she found out how the school was exploded, and it was by her.
Whoops.
And that she was goaded into, that we learned eventually that she was goaded into it. So she killed a bunch of people, and that's why she's not the hero of the show. And now we know why Olivia Munn is doing the secondary role, because she gets all the action, and Myfanwy gets to pout around. So we learned the love story is important. That's what the book was missing. It just had silly, supernatural, cool threats. Boring.
Okay, so is it okay to talk about the sex scene?
Oh boy, yes, get right to it then.
What was interesting is that he didn't want to do it on the couch, but it was still part of his billable hours. These psychiatrists are terrible.
Oh boy, is that it? We waited all this time for that gag. He just like, please, can I get to my bit now?
Okay,
yes. Okay, yes.
So after her,
you know what? Hold on now. We learned another important piece of information.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Yeah, never break up with Myfanwy.
Good point.
Even if she lost her memory, she still comes back.
Yeah, no, that's not why you don't want to break up with Myfanwy, Lady Stephanie. It's because she's going to fucking bring the building down around you.
Well,
you're like, yeah, 6 on one hand, half a dozen on the other.
Glass half full. All right, so Myfanwy, let's wrap up her story here in Chapter 4.
Let's do. I don't know why we got rid of the most exciting storyline first.
She heads back to her place after she runs out, putting on her clothes as she runs down the store. She heads back to her place. She gets inside when who comes up to her door?
Well, hold on. Do you want to cover that? I mean, I think we need to save that. We need to dovetail it with the Grantchester storyline.
Okay.
Because there's more of Grantchester we're not hitting. And if we miss any of Grantchester's scenes, I'm going to be very upset.
Well, I made this joke last night that what we're going to do is we're going to watch Grantchester search through Myfanwy's underwear drawer in real time, it felt like in the show. Who wiped the double M.
Double M.
Myfanwy memories. Before we get to them, sure, let's go back and talk about Grantchester. I mentioned that he shows up in this episode walking into Myfanwy's office, pretty much confronting her with everything he knows. He's like, why were these vultures going after you? Why are you important? Maybe he doesn't know about this school tragedy, which can definitely lead to some booty afternoon delights. So he decides to do what anybody would do. Break into Myfanwy's apartment and search for why they were trying to grab her. And I joke, but it feels like he searched her apartment in real time. Now, Myfanwy comes in for a bit. He evades her. He didn't make her go to sleep.
Well, he can't find her special spot. My question is, after she leaves, it still seems like he doesn't know where her special spot is.
That's a great point. He wore gloves because he didn't want to get shocked. He took off his shoes because he didn't want her to notice that somebody had been in her apartment. Of course, he does make one discovery the red key and the blue key. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, boy.
These keys, you thought they weren't going to come back into play, but these are playing keys. He goes to the bank. He opens up the safety deposit box, which Myfanwy didn't get a chance to open in the first episode, and he finds a bunch of passports where Myfanwy could leave the country under an assumed identity, and lots of dollar bills, y'all. Hello.
And he didn't even care about the dollar bills. He's just like, oh.
It's the passports that does it to her. And also, he says earlier to Farrier that this is, again, some really deft plotting, that it's a Lugot bank.
Mm-hmm. And what do we know about the Lugots?
Well,
they're bad. They're the big bad.
I don't know. Both more and less than I'd like to know.
So then Grantchester, he has this discussion with your girl, with Lady Farrier. And then how does he end the episode, Catfish?
I mean, amazingly, as he always does, just looking super sexy.
Fair enough. What do you think? Oh, I guess we should talk about this. And I know this group of podcasters has ideas based on their knowledge of the books, which may be pointless knowledge from the books going to this show. But
I can tell you already, based on tonight, that our knowledge from the shows is pointless.
But how about this? How many people think Grantchester could be involved in this conspiracy? The show is setting it up like he's not at all because he keeps investigating it like every single other person. Any chance Grantchester is a big bad? Let's go to Lady Stephanie first. What are your thoughts on Grantchester?
As handsome as he is, I think he might be a big bad, but not in the way that we expect. I think they might throw some kind of curveball at us. Like, I don't think he's the one who wiped her memories or who told somebody to wipe her memory. I think he might be involved in some other sinister plot, but just not the one that we're thinking of. Anybody?
I think that's a good call. Catfish?
I mean, the problem is, based on the books, and honestly, if anybody's listening to this podcast, they probably won't read the books, which is a shame. But, I mean, they've both limited some of the characters that were in the books and added some new ones. So, as far as we go right now, the only person who's innocent in the books admitted to being a part of whatever's going on with Myfanwy tonight. So all bets are off on that point of view. And as far as Grantchester, well, I mean, I'm not quite sure how much of a big bad, unless when Lady Farrier says, I agreed to trade you, that she meant she just was setting up a dinner date for Myfanwy. It seems to me that I don't know how much more worse Grantchester could be vis-a-vis Myfanwy as opposed to Farrier.
All right. Okay.
What do you think, Bubba?
I want him to be the bad guy. Okay. Just because nobody who dresses that nice should be good.
I mean, he is a sexy, sexy man.
All right. Let's get to the third plot line, which hit in Chapter 4, and it's one that I think is the cleanest. It's Monica Reed. Last week, she was posing as a EVA seller to track down, or buyer, to track down this terrible human trafficking ring. She is tracking some of these EVA sellers through the city to pick up her package when what happens? She gets into a traffic jam. Thanks a lot, London ways. Terrible traffic there by the river.
Double T.
Double T?
Terrible traffic.
Oh, right, of course. So while she's there, everybody's freaking out because the EVA in the armored truck has broken free. She's running forward. People are pointing guns at each other. What's going on? What's going on? She's like, listen, you need to put down your guns. I have to hide my superpowers. You guys, nobody needs to get hurt. I have to hide my superpower. You know what, the hell with it. And she superpowers them into the armored truck and takes them out. She is the action hero. She seemingly gets to do more active things than our lead, Myfanwy. She wants to know where the cargo is. They don't know the cargo has escaped. She is frustrated and she screams the F word, which everybody thinks, yeah, the traffic's bad, but calm down, American, come on.
I mean, between this scene and the way she talks to the Gestalt, again, in the book, the Gestalt were very serious, intimidating, whatever. And if any dirty American talked to them the way she does, that American would have been vaporized. So I appreciate making them, I don't know, whatever you've got there.
They were kind of funny. I liked it.
Right, they're office politics. They're talking trash about her and how she's not doing anything. She's just going off on some rogue mission because of her vulture boyfriend. Hello. And that is a great scene between Monica Reed and the Gestalt. I think it's probably, once again, one of the best things in the episode. Apologies to Grantchester's wardrobe.
I thought it was also funny. She told him at least like 2 or 3 times, like, you guys are 5 steps behind me. Like, what are you doing?
That's funny because I found her to be very, both in episode 3 and episode 4, very, like, I watch her and I'm like, I'm embarrassed to be an American. So I'm glad that you guys are digging her. I just find her to be kind of a dick.
I like it.
All right, there you go.
You're right.
Shut up, you stuffy bricks.
You're right. She's not very friendly. The only way she was able to bond with the secretary is by they both have these horror stories, and she's tough, but she's active. Once again, Myfanwy, I would call her reactive, but sometimes it's not even that. So the fact that she's trying to kick butt, like you would assume you want your heroes, your leads, you want your leads to be active in pursuing what they want to pursue. And Myfanwy, it seems like a meandering pursuit where Monica Reed, she may be, not that she may need to talk about her office politics and her office manner, but at least she's determined to achieve a goal that we can understand.
I don't know. I mean, you keep talking about action this, action that. Seems to me Myfanwy got the most action this episode of anybody.
Oh, snap.
That was pretty quick.
Their interaction was electric.
Boogie, oogie, oogie. What happens next with Monica Reed? Catfish, why don't you lead us through that?
All right, well, there is, the next thing I have is that they go on a thrilling chase to track down the kid. And I know it's thrilling because they play really thrilling music.
Yes.
That was the one way I was able to tell it was thrilling.
But they can't catch the kid running away. They
can't catch him because he's able to convince people. Well, he's able to convince people
to forget him.
Yeah.
He makes people have short-term amnesia. You don't remember me running past. And he's running through, what do you call this segment here where he's running through?
I was wondering that
this
myself.
Fun little market, I want to say South Bank, south side of the Thames. What do you think's going on?
Very crowded.
Yeah, and terrible traffic, so Monica hates it. She's like, run!
Yeah, so they can't get him.
Even with all their special powers, even with their ability to see these cameras, because one Gestalt is back at headquarters watching the cameras, letting everybody know where to go through the group mind. This person was able to evade them. Even when a Bobby cop puts his hand on this EVA, the EVA evades. So good.
He was warned, don't touch him.
You got to always wear gloves. Who knew that London, that when you greet people in London, you always got to be wearing gloves?
And who knew that these EVAs were so easily deterred by gloves?
And so, okay, Catfish, he shows up at Myfanwy's apartment. He's like, you don't remember me, but you don't know me, but I know you.
Okay, but before
I took your memory. Oh, that's a pretty good ending.
Okay, so but before that, we find out who he is because he's mentioned earlier in the episode. Well, Farrier's got the somebody's cell phone,
right?
And then she goes and talks to that woman about who Nazim is. So we know, and the woman says, Nazim's all over the place, making people forget their memories. This happens before Nazim shows up and says, "I'm Nazim." Now, I watched this scene a couple times.
Okay. You mean the scene between Lady Farrier and the woman in the cell?
Mm-hmm. Pawn Bubba, Lady Stephanie. I watched the scene a couple times, and then I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not watching this scene a third time. Somebody's going to explain this to me.
Okay, let's hear it. What is your question?
Well, you're going to explain to me what's going on. She's like, we meant to make this trade. You got to get him back. He's out there.
Here's his phone. Here's his phone. Look at it.
Yeah, no, here's his phone. You contact him. We were going to make a trade. You get Myfanwy, I get Nazim. But Nazim's out there making people forget their memories. You call him. No, I won't call him. What did you intuit was Farrier's grand plan there?
Annoyance.
I don't know.
You can't waterboard.
It worked on me.
With these annoying Geneva conventions, you can't torture prisoners anymore. So you just frustrate them.
Well, no. I'm trying to get somebody to explain to me what her plan was. Were they just making it deliberately obtuse to make Farrier look like the bad person when she's not really the bad person? Or was it explained enough for someone besides myself to understand it?
No, because I did not understand it either, and I tend to be not a dope.
I'm a dope, but usually twice I can get it.
This reminds me of a classic SNL skit with the great Martin Short. He's there and he's playing a cop, and this other cop says, all right, listen, let's play good cop, bad cop. I'll be the good cop, you be the bad cop. So Martin Short walks in and he's like, oh, look, I've handcuffed my own hands together. I'm such a bad cop. Tell me what's going on. And so maybe that's it. Maybe Lady Farrier was going for it. I'm inept. Help me. Now, do you want to say, guys, what Lady Farrier's special power is? We've seen Grantchester's got the ability to make people fall asleep.
Well, they deliberately avoided the only special power that I know she has.
Yes.
Right.
That she can communicate with people while they're sleeping. She appears to them in a dream and can talk to them. And they deliberately decided to throw that out the window because I guess that was too interesting.
Yeah.
Copyright from Inception said you can't do that anymore. And so they had to go this more fun route of
so maybe they
actors
will give her
interacting.
Maybe they'll give her a different power altogether. They seem to be trying to avoid any of the more interesting powers that people actually had in the books, both good and bad. They decided, that maybe would be too unbelievable. So when we do our fantasy show, we should make it more believable because people will like it better that way.
And that's the hallmark of fantasy, believability.
Exactly. And that is why this show is so good. 8.5 triple G's.
Triple G?
Yeah, godly Grantchester.
Yeah, you can't remember.
You know what? I heard the bell again. I thought I fell asleep for a second.
Guys, we are at the halfway point. Obviously, listeners, we are very tough on this show. We know what a great story this could be. All of us are very tough on this show. Guys, we're at the halfway point. What do you need to happen in the last 4 episodes to turn you around on this Star show? And I'll go first while you guys think of your answers. And I'll go back to what I've always been saying. Myfanwy, just by the setup, is supposed to be the main character. We're supposed to be feeling emotions for all the things she's feeling. When she's nervous, we should feel nervous. When she's afraid, when she's shocked by a revelation, we should be shocked by a revelation. The show seems to be undercutting these revelations. We have 4 more episodes. I think there is a way they can turn this around. I think there is a way they can make this work. And I think the only way they can make it work is by getting us to be on Team Myfanwy and to care about her and be invested in what she's trying to learn, what she's trying to do. So that's my wish for these final 4 episodes. Lady Stephanie, what's it going to take, in your opinion, for the second half of the season to bring it home?
Ideally, which is a tall order, and it's not realistic. I want them to kind of steer it back towards maybe closer to the original source material, but I don't think that's going to happen. So instead, I'm going to say I want more Monica and Gestalt. I'm more invested in that story. So maybe my answer is similar to yours, that we need to be more invested in Myfanwy for me to continue this. But I'm content being invested in Gestalt.
Okay. Yeah, I am too. They're fun to watch. They're fun to see. They have a different vibe than the characters in the book, but I like it a lot. Catfish, You have gone with your 8.5 ranking, but obviously you have been putting out some snarky, snide remarks. What do you think they could do in these final 4 episodes, the second half of Season 1, to really get this thing back on track and get us invested like you were so invested in the book?
2 words.
Yep.
More Grantchester.
So he's the only character you like. You don't like any other character but him.
Well, no. I mean, we've got the ugly American.
But you don't seem to like her. You said she's mean, and we've got Gestalt, formerly in the book intimidating and scary, and now kind of buffoons. We've got Myfanwy, who goes back and forth from weak to all of a sudden a chanteuse. And then we've got Grantchester, who is super sexy, and he knows it. I say, give me more Grantchester. All right, listeners, we want to know what you think. We have been tough on this show. We want it to turn around and thrill us and make us laugh and make us excited. What is it going to take for you? Write us on our Twitter page at @PHQ. That's the word double, the single letter P, then the letters HQ for headquarters. At @PHQ on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/PHQ. Next week, guys, we'll be looking at Chapter 5. Myfanwy and Monica work to extricate a young EVA. Why Gestalt's suspicions of Myfanwy lead to a confrontation.
Dun, dun, dun.
Whoa. What about Grantchester?
He might be taking next week off.
He gone.
No!
Now, we're going to end this podcast the way we end every Myfanwy's Epiphany podcast. That's where we tell you about an epiphany one of the podcast hosts have had. We're all going to tell an epiphany, or we're going to say a EVA mind wipe, something we wish we wouldn't remember over the last week. Because it's been 2 weeks, we've got so much to grab from. Double C. Chevalier Catfish.
Oh, right.
What is your epiphany? What is your epiphany or your EVA mind wipe for this week?
My epiphany of the week was this is Saturday. I played D&D for the first time in 35 years.
Wow. You're older than 35? Wow.
37.
Oh.
And I forgot how much it was fun because I chose as my character a sexy vest and tie wearing magician.
Named Grantchester?
You mean young Dumbledore from the last Fantastic Beasts movie?
Actually, I'm a gnome sorcerer, and my name is Dumbleduck.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Dear.
Because you know what? I need some more fantasy in my life.
All right, I'll go next. And Chevalier Catfish always has the epiphanies. I always love going for the EVA mind wipe. And so it was during this 2-week process when the American president, not Boris Johnson, as we keep mocking the British on this podcast, but it was the American president, I can't think of his name right now, it doesn't come to mind, who decided to listen as his followers chanted out some terrible things. And then the next day he pointed out that he did try to stop it by speaking quickly and changing the subject. Then the day after that, he said his followers who said the terrible chant, which he kind of encouraged them and started, they're the greatest Americans ever. So I want that same ability, meaning I want to do something, the next day forget it, and say something contradictory, and forget it, and say something contradictory. And I really want to forget this little moment in American history. That's my hopeful EVA mind wipe.
Now, when you say little moment, do you mean the last 3 years?
I'm aiming small at big first. Aiming small, that's mine. Lady Stephanie, we have missed you on these podcasts. We're so happy, even if we've got some trouble with the show, we are so happy that you're on this podcast with us. Lady Stephanie, do you have an epiphany or an EVA mind wipe you wish for from this last week of your life?
Yes, I mean, my mind has already been wiped, but I'd like another one. This past week, across the country, it's been quite the heat wave. So hot outside, you can't take your dog out, you can't sit outside. here in Indiana, the Midwest, you couldn't go outside without being engulfed in humidity and not breathe. So I wish to forget that. And I think my wish has come true. It was a beautiful 70 degrees today.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I am so jealous, Lady Stephanie. That sounds so good. You know,
Take a little lighter note.
The one thing I don't like about the humidity is when I go out and it really makes my hair kind of frizz up, waggle up. It really, oh, wait a minute. Harpo hair Gestalt. It's just a humid summer.
Now you just have to dye it super platinum white blonde.
Yeah, and then get that tracksuit.
I'm going to do it, folks. If this show is renewed for season 2, I'm getting the tracksuit. For everybody here on Myfanwy's Epiphany podcast, my name's Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at FitandTrim. That's FITTENTRIM at FitandTrim on Twitter. And I'm always joined by the Double C.
Double C!
Yeah,
Chevalier Catfish. You can hit me up at CJGman on 67. Oh, sorry, CJGman67 on Twitter. I wish I could forget everything.
Lady Stephanie, how can people who love the Rook and hate the Rook talk to you?
Well, if you want to complain and commiserate with me, I'm on Twitter at SMPersephone. That's SM Persephone.
And you will hear us next time on
Myfanwy's
Epiphany!
Yay!
All right, so now let's watch that sex scene again.
Oh my God!
It wasn't even that great.
No, it wasn't.
Of flashes. It's like watching a fight in a Bourne movie.
Is it
run down the steps without a shirt on?
Yeah, she did. She was putting it on.
That's what I thought.
But is it possible that the mind wipe guy saw them having sex and thought, you know what, they aren't going to want to remember this, and that's why it flashed so quickly? He wiped their minds.
A child, Bubba. How dare you?
He's in Georgia now.
Hey, now.
Oh, shit. Can I tell you how much I fucking hate this show?
No, wait, I haven't stopped recording yet.
Guys, it was really hard to get through this, or to watch the episode. It wasn't hard to talk with you. It was hard to watch.
I know, it is tough to get through this thing. They're not building much drama.
They're doing everything they are doing wrong. They're doing every single thing wrong. Even they decide to throw out almost everything from the book and add a whole bunch of new shit. They're still doing all that new shit wrong.
I was thinking that if I watched this show and went to read the book, I would either be so confused or... Because, like, the opposite way, reading the book and watching the show, I'm just, like, pissed. I don't know what it would be like to watch the show and then read the book. You'd be like, this is not the show I just watched.
Well, what?
Right. I mean, first of all, you'd know so much. I mean, after this first, I can't imagine we're going to know much more about, we're not going to know as much about her as we do at the beginning of the book by the end of this show, the end of this season, the final season. So, I mean, you'll know so much more in the book just reading the first couple chapters.
I wonder what the author thinks.
That's a great question. Can I pitch an idea to you guys? I'm not saying this is definitely it, but it's an idea that I've thought about, in that why do you buy this book and then change it so much? Why have you turned it more into a TV show, as I keep saying, you know, kind of a adventure of the week, investigation of the week by Monica Reed? And I was wondering if this is a joint co-production. You know, it's airing on different channels all around the world. And Stars here in the United States, they bought it from the production house Lionsgate. Stars, their more successful shows are shows like Outlander, shows theoretically like The White Princess. I'm not sure Sweet Bitter is a huge popular show or Vita is a huge popular show, but they are trying to almost have a lot of female-centric, empowering shows. And
right, so but why buy this one? This one has the original story has no romance in it.
Well, this is what I'm saying. They bought this because they thought it might work with their show Counterpart, but Counterpart, as critically acclaimed as it wasn't getting good ratings. And so it was something like, well, okay, we're going to cancel Counterpart. It won't be with Counterpart. Let's have it be more of a a modern woman in the city thing with, romance and intrigue and relationships with sexy Gestalt.
Well, it's funny, it's not that I am in no way, shape, or form a fan of Stephanie Meyer, but again, I always wonder how things changed after they had a disagreement about the direction of the show, and she stopped being the showrunner.
Yeah.
Right. I think I'm going to tweet at the author and ask him, just politely, what do you think of the show?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I want to see this.
I hope he sends you a picture of his bank statement.
Ow.
That would be nice. He only has, hold on, I just went to his Twitter. He still only has, less than 3,000 followers.
Yeah, well, the show's doing him no favors.
No.
You guys are so tough on this show.
It's horrible. I
just love the book so much, and it's just what the hell?
That's the thing. It's horrible on its own, but again, I'm just flabbergasted. Why change so much of it? The book was good. It made a lot of people read it. Why change so much?
But the book was good in a lot of fantasy tones, like you keep mentioning Stephanie Meyer, and perhaps they're just afraid they can't compete in fantasy. They compete in admittedly, Outlander is a kind of a female historical fantasy, historical fiction. But
there's not. I mean, the whole premise is based on a fantasy, but once you get into the world, there's a little bit of magic, but that's about it.
All right, so I have brought up the hashtag The Rook on Twitter, and let's look at the most recent tweets about this popular show on Starz. So, here we go, and we'll just read them and then you guys react. This will be a new segment of the podcast.
Okay.
What's going on? What do people say about The Rook? All right, Amanda Fitz on Twitter writes, loving The Rook and loving Gestalt. Super interesting character.
Well, I agree with Amanda Fitz on Gestalt.
Drive and Starvation at I'm So Active on Twitter writes, so I'm watching The Rook on Starz. I'm on the 4th episode, and I still have no idea what's going on. But I'm still low-key interested for some reason.
Well, I agree with them that I still don't know what's going on either. So I'm agreeing with these tweets.
Now, look, I found a tweet that I think may explain that they're getting the audience they're going for, because there's a picture of Myfanwy and Eliza kissing, and it says Myfanwy and Eliza kissed in The Rook, and then in all caps, I'm screaming.
Allison Keene, a TV critic, wrote, just caught up with hashtag The Rook. Anyone else watching? I'm enjoying the superpower mystery spy blend. Also love how much they seem to shoot on location in London.
Read the next one.
Okay, B_Runk on Twitter wrote, as someone who's read The Rook, I'm having a hard time getting into the show. I love the books, and I'm not sure why The Rook decided to change some major storylines. Gestalt being the, quote, frenemy? This romance subplot is officially killing me. Myfanwy hiding. It's a thread where she goes on and says, listen, her amnesia versus basically announcing it, and the fact that the memory wipe actually helps her become stronger, less anxious person. Back to the books for me.
I agree there. I'm agreeing with all the tweets, well, except the ones that people say that they're interested.
Now, did anybody read about the Rook panel at Comic-Con?
No.
Me neither.
Oh.
Because I did it.
So what should I tweet to the author?
Just nice and super sweet. Hey, something like you said. Let them fill it in. Loved the book. Loved your novel. Started watching The Rook. What are your thoughts on the show? Keep it generic, and then he might respond, as opposed to,